Okay, today in class, I could not be there, and I apologize. Haven't been feeling well. I had a sinus infection, so I'm going to record these and put them on YouTube for you to view. So, today we're learning about Lesson 95, which is on reciprocals. And we kind of talked about this, I guess it was a week ago, what a reciprocal is. So hopefully you will remember. I'm going to go in and write it down, the word reciprocal. And what it means is, let's say I had a 2/3 of a fraction, okay, the fraction 2/3, and the reciprocal of 2/3 is actually like on the opposite, or for the positions of the numerator and the denominator to switch, okay? And this is called invert. If we invert the fraction, then we change the numerator to the denominator and the denominator to the numerator. So the reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2, okay? So all we did is switch the numerator to the denominator and this denominator to its numerator, okay? So you see how it's done? It's really quite simple, okay? But what if we have 1/2, okay? If I have 1/2 as a fraction, okay, and I were to write its reciprocal, then hopefully you see that it'll be 2/1. And what do you know that 2/1 means? Hopefully you remember that it actually is just whole number 2. 2/1 means the same thing as whole number 2. We talked about that a few weeks ago as well. Okay, so if I were to ask you, what is the reciprocal of 4? Okay, well, that's the whole number, all right? And if I'm asking you the reciprocal, we need to make it into a fraction, okay? So first, how do I make 4 into a fraction? Hopefully you remember from a few weeks ago, we talked about just putting it over 1. And that means the whole number 4 as a fraction becomes 4/1. So then, if I were to make its reciprocal, then it would be 1/4, okay? So hopefully you can easily see how this is done, okay? Now, let's work some of the problems you're going to be seeing, okay? They're going to say, what is the reciprocal of, and they may say something like 5/6. Well, hopefully, just by looking at this, you're just going to switch them. And so the answer would be 6/5. All right? Now, let's look at something that's kind of cool, okay? What I want you to notice is if I have the fraction 2/3, okay, and I were to make its reciprocal 3/2, and I multiply both those numbers, the fraction and its reciprocal, guess what it will always equal? Well, let's look at this one. This is 2 times 3, which is 6, and 3 times 2, which is 6. And what do we know if I were to look at a pie, okay, and I were to break it up into 6 spots, and I had 6 out of 6, what do you see happens? It makes a whole. Okay, hopefully you can see that, 1 whole. So 6/6 equals 1. So any reciprocal or fraction multiplied by its reciprocal will always equal 1 whole. Let me show you another example so you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, a while ago we did 5/6, okay, and its reciprocal would be 6/5, okay? And if I multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, guess what's going to happen? Well, 5 times 6 is 30, and 6 times 5 is 30. So 30 out of 30, that would mean if I had 30 different pieces right here broken up, and I filled in 30 out of the 30, what do you notice happens? I fill in a whole 1, okay? So no matter what we do, when we multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, we always get the answer of a whole 1. 1 whole, okay? Now, I just wanted to review that with you because then they're going to ask you something like this, okay? Example number 2, you can read along with me. It says, what is the product, I'm just going to write down product, of 1/3 and its reciprocal? Okay? What is the product of 1/3 and its reciprocal? Hopefully you remember what product means. It means the answer to a multiplication problem. So they're basically saying what times what equals, this would be my product. Okay, so they're asking me, what is the product of 1/3 and its reciprocal? So what is the reciprocal of 1/3? Hopefully you know that it's 3/1 because we just switched them. And so that would be 1 times 3 would be 3. And 3 times 1 would be 3. And as we see, 3 out of 3 equals 1 whole. Okay? You see how that works? So they asked me, what is the product of 1/3 and its reciprocal? The answer is 1 whole. Okay? Now, let's answer this question. Okay? It asks me, what is the reciprocal of 4 in example 3? Okay, and we kind of did this one already, actually. What is the reciprocal of 4? Hopefully you remember that we need to make whole number 4 into a fraction. And then the reciprocal of that would be 1/4. So that would be our answer. All right? It's pretty simple. Let's look at one last one. This is example 4, and here's what it tells me to do. It says divide this. 1 divided by 3/4. Now, what this is saying is 1 is divided into how many 3/4? Remember how we talked about that? 1 is divided into how many 3/4? Or you can also say it means how many 3/4 are in 1. That's what this is saying. How many 3/4 are in the number, whole number 1? Okay? And what we're asking here, we kind of did this in class the other day, okay? But when you're looking at this question, how many 3/4 are in 1, you can do this in 2 ways, okay? The first one is to go 3/4, how many 3/4 are in 1 equal 1. R in 1 kind of means the same thing as equals 1. So how many 3/4 equal 1? Well, we know that the answer is 4/3, right? Because that's its reciprocal, and its reciprocal always equals the whole number 1. So what this is asking, how many 3/4 are in 1, we can easily answer that question 4/3 because we know that the reciprocal of it equals 1. Okay, another way to think this through, if you don't like that style or that way, remember how I told you can place any number in here? And so here we go. For example, I can just put real numbers in instead of fractions. And so I would say, how many 5s are in 45? Well, you know, in order to work this problem, that we would do 45 divided by 5. Okay? Same thing here. We're going to do 1 divided by 3/4, which is what you see up here. Okay? Now, let's work 1 divided by 3/4. Hopefully you remember me telling you the other day that I've kind of given you a rule to follow, and what that is that you really can't divide by fractions. Okay? You can't divide fractions. You actually are going to have to multiply them. But you actually can divide by fractions, but you're making its reciprocal. Okay, so for an easier way for your brain to understand it, just try to remember that you cannot really divide a fraction. You're really going to have to multiply it. Okay, so this is what this is going to look like, is 1 times, and remember, when you change this division to multiplication, the number or the fraction to the right changes into its reciprocal. Okay, so 3/4 would become 4/3. Okay, so did you see what I did? I had divide here, and I changed it to multiply, which is called an invert operation. Okay, But when I do that, I also have to change the fraction to the right, not to the left, to the right. Okay, and you would change it to its invert form, which is the opposite or reciprocal. So 3/4 would become 4/3. So now if I were to answer this problem, this is how we're going to work it. This says 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 3 is 3. So the answer is 4/3. If it helps you to take this 1 and make it 1 over 1, it means the same thing. That's sometimes easier for people to see. Okay, so that is how we are going to do lesson 95.